Ready.
Thank you. I'd like to call the special session meeting to get to order today, Thursday, August 7th, 2025 at 8 a.m. in the morning. And roll call, Trina, please.
Yes, Mayor Morris.
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley.
Here.
Commissioner Elmer.
Here.
Commissioner Garvin hopefully will be joining us soon. Don't see him yet. Commissioner Macy Baker.
Here.
Okay, so we're going to do an update on our facility project and the warehouse construction method. Chad, are you going to start this process?
I'll start.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks once again for coming in for a special meeting. Yeah, today we're looking for commission approval on the material to be used for the construction of the expansion of the warehouse. So we can proceed with the design. At the last meeting, special meeting on the 31st, staff presented two options for construction materials for the warehouse addition. We have mass plywood panels or structural steel. It is the opinion of our engineering and architectural team that the two materials would perform very similarly, and that they would both be able to function as a immediate occupancy risk category 4 structure for seismic rating. There's also the opinion of our team that if MPP is designed, installed, and maintained in accordance with best practices, that is expected to perform as long as reliable as one constructed out of steel. So at the end of the meeting, last meeting, there was some unanswered questions from the commission. Try to gather those the best to our ability and provide answers to those, which are included in the memorandum. I don't know if we want to I can go one by one and just kind of briefly hit on each one. And then we can kind of expand on them as we go. So I'll start with number one on the memo regarding Ferris's warranty. Does it involve replacing defective material or replacing and installing defective material? I did include a little snippet of their Ferris's warranty language. Also did include their terms and conditions in the back, which has more information on the warranty. But at the end of the day, the warranty will cover replacement of the panel itself, but the warranty does not cover any labor, installation, removal, or consequential damages.
Any questions on that, Tom? I think that was one of your questions.
Yeah, it was, and I'd like Sam to correct me if I'm wrong on this, please. But there was something in the memo that said this is allowed by Uniform Commercial Code, which, as I remember, it is allowed. And what it does is it lets a manufacturer reduce their responsibility from what you would normally have. They have these implied warranties that it's going to work and fitness for a particular purpose. And Kelsey was correct in that he didn't say that they hadn't done that, but now we know that they have done that. So we know that Ferris is saying that if there's a problem with it, and what I think of is it's probably, they get bad glue or something. If there's bad glue and there starts to be a problem, they just ship us a new panel or a new post or a new beam, and the rest of it's on us. And I don't think your steel manufacturer is going to do that to you. I think Ferris's lawyer did a really good job for Ferris, but I think that it's and it's probably not unusual in the industry to try to do that, but I don't think it's something we should do to our ratepayers, that we should say, well, that's okay. So is my analysis in line with yours on the Uniform Commercial Code issue, Sam?
Tom, I don't pretend to be an expert in that. I don't disagree with your analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Any other commissioners have some comments about that?
I did a little bit of research, not a lot, just looking at some of the steel companies versus, or just to that point, and at least what I came up with it says it looks like they're very similar in the steel companies as they are in the mass plywood or in this industry. That the warranties are, they kind of are the same. They all say that they'll replace, you know, in the steel side, it's if it starts corroding or their coating that they put on it fails. That's typically what they say happens in the steel side, is that they coat it with something that keeps it from rusting. And so a lot of it happens down at the coast. I think that happens on the coast areas versus more like inland or anything. But most of those issues come with that coating failing, and they say that it's that, or those warranties are similar. They'll replace the part through the warranty, but not the labor. At least the three of the bigger steel companies that I looked at, they were the same warranty. I mean,
Sure.
So
Thank you.
The,
Go
the
ahead.
question I would have about that is a coating failing similar to the idea, I mean, would they have the same consequence to us as, again, for us getting through no fault of their own even, a bad batch of glue and things start delaminating? Would that be the same kind of structural problem, a coating failing in our environment where we keep it dry?
I would I would say similar. I would say, I mean, if we're protecting that, you know, if the construction is done correctly and it's all protected from the weather, and it was just, I guess if we're saying there was a bad batch of glue, I guess I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't know what
Yeah.
that would look like. I mean, if it was the entire structure started delaminating, other than I don't know. I've never heard of anything like that, but I'm not saying that can't happen, but
I guess I would ask on that is if there was a bad batch of glue, it wouldn't just be our project that would be part of that. That would that go back to the company that provides the glue versus and a suit there? I guess I'm just wondering, how has that ever happened? It could be failures in adhesives, tape on sheetrock, and I guess I'm just wondering what the possibilities are, and have there been anything like that in the past? Who would answer that? Okay.
I can answer
Chelsea.
from what we know at least in our history, and that's that we haven't experienced a bad batch of glue like that. All of our glue vendors also are held to some pretty strict code standards that require really thorough testing. And so with every batch of glue that we do get a full test report that shows that the standard they hold their glue to, the ingredients, the mix, that those all met the standards of their quality control processes. I would also say if there was a bad batch of glue, that those delamination, the cyclic delamination testing that we do as part of our quality control system is thorough enough and robust enough that it would catch those types of sort of universal failures. And like I mentioned in the memo, we haven't experienced a time where we've had a glue delamination failure make it to the field. While there have been cases of delamination in panels here and there, our quality control system catches those, and we're able to pull those out and remake the panels. But typically that's not due to a bad batch of glue. It's due to something funky going on with either the fiber itself and the way that the individual veneers adhere together. And we haven't experienced a cold press. So just a little bit of background, the plywood sheets that make up our mass ply panels are glued together in a hot press with a PF glue, and then the 1-inch sheets that make up the billet of material, the mass ply, are glued together with a melamine formaldehyde and MF glue in a cold press. And we haven't experienced a cold press failure that I'm aware of. And then just to sort of follow up on that initial comment, I did do some pretty thorough research about industry standards for warranties that I included in the in the memo that I sent over. And the two largest CLT manufacturers, which is in the same industry as we are, have an identical warranty statement regarding labor and installation costs. I even looked at Boise Cascade just because they're another well-known, well-regarded engineered wood products manufacturer in the region, and they have the same warranty. And I also looked at the three largest pre-engineered steel structure manufacturers, and their warranties were identical. Butler Manufacturing, Nucor, and Star Building Systems all said that they would provide replacement material only and exclude coverage for labor and installation.
Aaron, did
I
you?
was wondering if I could make a point too. Just two thoughts. One of them is I think when we're talking about parity between MPP and steel, I think if we're talking about glue failing, I think the correct kind of parity with steel isn't just the coating. It would probably be more with the welds, because most of these lighter gauge structures are made from plate steel that is welded together. So that would be probably a more accurate statement, because I think you could say, well, we're just going to sand off the rust and replace the coating. But it's really, if we want to be parallel in the arguments, it should be a structural related item. So for steel, to me, that would be more of a weld failure. And then Kelsey, could you talk to a little bit, because when I was out in the factory, I was talking with one of the plant supervisors about what Brevis does for quality control for the panels as they're laid up, and any testing that is done before they are shipped out. So the thought of like, if there's a bad batch of glue or some other issue with the panel, does Ferris have any QA or checks in place so that we kind of know that the panels going out have been tested and are performing to what is specified?
Yeah, I touched on that a bit in the memo that I sent out earlier the end of last week. And our quality control system requires us to test every every billet. And sometimes there are multiple panels cut out of a single billet. But with every billet that we manufacture, we perform what's called a 6-cycle vacuum pressure soak test. And in that process, we put a sample of our mass plywood in a pressure vessel, in a vacuum chamber that's filled with water. And trying to remember the exact details of the times, but there's sort of two stages. I believe that the first is an 8-hour soak where the water's the chamber is put under a vacuum and moisture is pulled into the wood for 8 hours. It's pulled out and dried, then put back in and soaked for 15 hours. And then I believe that 8 and 15 repeats 2 more times for a total of 6 cycles in that vacuum chamber before it's pulled out, dried, and tested with it's sort of supported, the piece of plywood is supported on both ends, and there's a test that presses down on the center of that piece of plywood to check for the sort of how robust the glue bond is, and to ensure that after that really thorough soaking and drying cycle, that wood, if there was a glue bond fail, doesn't fail and that it meets at least 75% of the original strength values. There are a number of other quality control tests that are done that I don't know as many of the details of, but I know that specifically with the glue bond, that's the sort of primary concern, and the primary would lead to a sort of bigger failure that would be difficult to repair in the field. Well, not difficult to repair in the field, but if there was a batch of glue that was affecting an entire project's worth of billets, that would be a really big concern for us. And so that test that we perform on every billet ensures that that glue bond is stable.
Could you speak to success rates or failure rates of these billets passing these tests?
I can't. I don't have that number at my fingertips, but what I could do is message my technical director right here now, and hopefully get an answer by the end of this commission meeting, if that's acceptable.
So real quickly,
Mhm.
every piece of material you send out goes through that test you just talked about?
Yeah, there's one test per billet of material. So when we create every panel or beam, they get cut out of a larger billet of raw material. When we gave that plant tour, we showed the billet layup station and then the press that creates that large format, either 4, 8, 10, or 12 feet wide by 32 feet to 48 feet long. And then the individual panels or beams or columns are cut from those billets, and every billet gets tested, but not every panel. If that makes sense. So yeah.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was just gonna say that yeah, in essence, the material that every panel, beam, and column that come from, that material is tested, but there is not, a test performed that's like cut off of the edge of each piece manufactured. Yeah.
And then I had a question about the comment that the steel might fail at the welds. That's something that happens normally. The welding happens on site under the contractor's supervision, right?
I was just trying to make an argument for parity, but usually with a lot of these prefabricated steel buildings or steel structures that have pre-assembled pieces that are brought out, a lot of it is shop welded, and there are inspection control measures for that. But I was just thinking for the parity of the argument of if a steel product like fails and it's not a rolled steel product, that would be, rather than just saying like, oh, the coating on it, failed, and then the glue laminated failed at an MPP. Those are two different pieces, kind of. Glue delamination is to me is more of a structural issue. The comparable structural issue to me would be a weld failing, either a shop weld or a field weld. And please keep in mind, those also have their own control measures and special inspection measures as well. So I was just for parity of argument, because I think you could, if we kept in that original line of argument, you could say, well, a coating issue isn't that bad. We'll just sand off the rust and put a primer on and repaint. It's not a big deal. However, a lead delamination is a big deal. So that's why I was bringing up the issue.
I would like to kind of give a little bit context just in general about warranties. For any building, really, the warranty, the GC will provide, their 1 year, and then on certain systems it'll be 2 years, especially ones that are typically involving water intrusion, envelope roofing. The roofing system is usually like a 25 to 30-year warranty. That one's very particular. But to give context to the matter, especially when it comes to kind of like a structure element, whether it be structural steel or a mass timber product or any other typical product, when it is covering the material itself and it's outside of that general warranty, it can be a little bit nuanced, and it can be nuanced whether labor is provided, just because then they will be impacting other systems and then also voiding other warranties. So that's, for context, that's typically why some elements like structural element might not provide, yeah, we'll come and take out this piece of steel or piece of mass timber and then put your whole system back together. So this hypothetical that we're discussing, it is, I would say, very, very, very uncommon, something like this to occur. My about 13 years with PNC, I have never seen a situation where a structural element has failed in which it was past, the typical GC warranty. And I would imagine if a situation was like this to occur, it would be more handled with, the supplier of whatever defective material happened, and insurance and lawyers. That would probably be the more likely scenario, no matter what the system is. I think for parity, my analysis would be that it's pretty much the type of warranties are on par with each other and industry standard.
Anybody else want to make a comment in there? No. All right, should we move on to the next item? Okay.
Okay. Would there be any insurance ramifications by selecting mass plywood panels as opposed to steel for the warehouse addition? Through email correspondence with Ryan Hartzell at Hagen Hamilton Insurance, he said for this project, using plywood wood panels would not pose any issues in terms of securing and maintaining coverage, should that be the chosen option. He did go on to say that the difference in insurance premiums is often minimal.
That's pretty big.
It's pretty big, but
It's an insurance answer.
Yeah.
Often minimal. Any questions? No? Okay. Okay, so let's down to number 3.
Okay, and we did get an email from Commissioner Tankersley regarding House Bill 2688, regarding the payment of prevailing wage. This is new. Commissioner Tankersley wanted us to check to determine whether he has a correct form of bill, and would the material discussed today in PP, would that apply to this new bill? And if it does, would be involved for the supplier in terms of trying to figure out and how to administer this and follow the rule? And also, if it does apply, would a substantial portion of our anticipated savings evaporate? It was mentioned last meeting that just due to the time, the offsite fabrication would reduce costs, both from a time save perspective. But by avoiding, prevailing wage, would those savings disappear? So the bill was signed into law August 1st of this year by the governor. I think there's a lot still up in the air right now. I think the rulemaking process is still going on. So what it's looking like is 2688 applies prevailing wage rate of pay to offsite custom work for use in public works projects. Prevailing wage for certain offsite bespoke work or custom work, fabricated, pre-constructed, assembled, or constructed in accordance with specifications for a particular work. Expansion of this law looks like it's probably going to impact manufacturing for certain systems as outlined in House Bill 2688. Like I said, they're going through the rulemaking process. I reached out to Boley via phone, email. I didn't hear anything back from them. I don't know if Boley right now has all the answers, or they're going through the rules. They have kind of outlined certain systems that could be impacted. And one of them was architectural panels, is I think the way they put it. I did kind of bounce it off Kelsey. They are aware, it's definitely on the radar. So they're kind of monitoring it. Their opinion is that they don't think it's going to impact them. I mean, it's a structural panel as opposed to an architectural. We can get into that a little bit, but as far as the monitoring, I'm just kind of guessing the way we currently use it. We're required to get certified payrolls from contractors, job sites to release 100% of payment. My assumption is that it would be the same for a manufacturer once this is implemented, that before we can release full payment, we'd be required to get certified payrolls from the manufacturer. And then also the solicitation documents would have to have that language in it, notifying the bidders that this is a prevailing wage project and needs to be paid, the wages be paid accordingly. So that's what I know. I think a lot of it's still up in the air. It's coming down the road. I don't know. I'll leave it there.
Sam, can you speak to that at all?
Well, the research I did, and I followed up from Commissioner Tangersley's question. The bill, which was adopted, initially was introduced, had an operative date of January 1, 2026. It was moved. The operative date now is July 1, 2026. So there's a reasonable probability, I think is how the bill's worded. If we're under contract before that date, it very well may not apply to our project. But that would be something. And I can say that as far as what Shad's speaking to, it does also indicate that BOLI has to write rules, and they may exclude certain
Panels.
panels. Well, not panels. They may exclude certain items.
Yeah.
From application of the rule. So there may be types of things that are manufactured offsite. The BOLI decides are where the prevailing wage issue is not applicable to that particular system. But at this point, we don't know that, and they're going to be going through rulemaking, and they're supposed to have those rules in place before the operative date of July 1, 2026.
And prevailing wage applies to the fabricator of the steel structure, I would assume.
I think
Because
it could.
Their
Yeah.
labor union.
Yeah.
But I think Tom's point was that we calculated the savings based on not assuming prevailing wage. Is that right, Tom?
Yes, and
Okay.
as I understood it from our contractor, and he can correct me if I'm wrong, one big part of the savings was that these things would be fabricated or a lot of it be off-site, and you wouldn't have the time of doing it on-site. And that strikes me as that's what they're trying to get to with the bill. And if we get semi-standard pieces of steel, maybe cut to our size, but that's it, that would be, I think that there'd be a better, and Sam can help me here, I think there'd be a much better argument that that's not prevailing wage than if we have them, build things like I think First does, that just, kind of go right into your project without, you have to assemble it, but you don't cut it, you don't fit it, it's done right the first time for you. So again, help me if I'm wrong on that, but I think a lot of our savings could potentially go away, even if some of the steel might be arguably part of it. It wouldn't be anywhere near what the Ferrera stuff would be. Is that correct?
I don't think that's absolutely accurate. Just off of the principle that when we have a structural steel structure on site, it requires a lot more on-site labor for erection and also for any bolted connections. And not only to mention that one, it's more laborious, it takes more time. And if you do any on-site welding, that gets even more expensive because that is a different trades classification within BOLI, which is more than an erector. And for this bill, I'm not familiar with this bill, but I feel like both manufacturing of structural mass timber product and a structural steel that comes together and gets shipped. I feel like those would be very similar. If this bill was to apply to one, I feel like it would possibly apply to the other more than likely. Once again, I can't really speak, but just based off what I know, I feel like they're kind of in that same category. I also wanted to speak more to how the rules are for implementing BOLI and how wages get set. So it's whenever a project is first advertised that involves labor, that is what sets the BOLI date. So if we were to advertise for early work package 6 months down the road to move earthwork, then those wages would get set at that first publication date. And if we were to say, all right, we have an early work package, we need someone to move dirt around, and then a year later we bid out the rest of the project, it would still go back to that very first date in which labor was needed and was publicly advertised.
So just to make sure I understand, in your opinion, then it doesn't make any difference. Your cost, your 300, was it $300,000? Your $300,000 cost savings would be the same whether if the prevailing wage applies?
I would say there would be relatively about the same amount of savings, because I feel like if not dollar wise, but overall, there would ultimately still be a net savings. I couldn't speak just to what that would be because I'm unfamiliar with the bill and what type of implication is. But I would say my point is that there would be a savings. It would be cheaper because the amount of labor that's required on site is significantly more with erecting a structural steel building versus if we were to pick and install large panels.
So part of it, make sure I understand correctly. Part of the savings is you save on-site, it's more efficient. You don't have the on-site labor. And the other part of the savings is the prevailing wage. Is that correct?
So yeah, is the large part is the labor and savings that it occurs on site.
And that number, what was that total number under your first calculation?
I think it was from our conceptual calculation based off of the building structure. It was like around 300,000, but keep in mind that number is a conceptual number based off what we were given. But the percentage of savings of what that was, I would have to look it up. That's kind of, the kind of takeaway. And I would say like all things equal, if this House bill applies to, on shop labor, then that is going to be seen, at both the ferrous shop and the structural steel shop. And then the true savings that's going to really occur is all the labor savings.
But you have a lot more what you call on-shop labor at Ferris than you do at the steel place, right? Because you have to do a lot of, I think you said you have to do a lot of the steel fabrication on site. And you already preparing for it.
It's the steel erection. So they will fabricate and build the parts and pieces. There'll be some middle process, a review, structural engineer will get involved. So the intention is always to kind of get all the pieces that is needed on site, and then it's built for the steel, which is a very laborious process. Mm-hmm. And especially if there's any field welds that occur, and that's a completely different labor rate dictated by BOLI.
Yeah, this is John. You also have to remember that the labor in the shop, it doesn't come just as pieces. You have to weld in the shop all the ends, all the connection pieces to whatever structural piece you're going to build. So there's significant amount of shop labor with the steel as well.
Any other comments, questions?
Yeah, I had one thing to mention. So from our understanding, it would just apply to the fabrication part of it, of our process, not to the manufacturing of the raw material. Just in the same sense, if there was a a light framed offsite pre-assembly or prefabricated panel manufacturer, they wouldn't charge the lumber company for the 2x4s that are going into the shop. They would just be charging the carpenters that are cutting those 2x4s to length and pre-assembling wall panels in their shop. So our understanding is that it would only apply if it does indeed end up applying to our product at all. It only apply to the CNC operators' wages, and as a portion of our total costs, their contribution is relatively low. And sort of on top of that, just in my understanding of how BOLI would be applied to a CNC operator, there is no CNC operator BOLI rate, and so they ask you to apply the BOLI rate to the closest trade that would be doing this work if they were on site, which our understanding would be like a carpenter. And frankly, I think our CNC operators are paid significantly more than a carpenter, and so we're really not sure what the cost impact would be at the end of the day, given that really all of the prefabrication work is done by a CNC operator, and there are only 3 of those operators in our shop. And as I was saying, as a proportion of the work, I think it's within I think it's under 10% of our total cost is CNC operators. So just for what it's worth.
Thank you. Adam?
Thank you. This might be for Chad. What's the total cost of this warehouse expansion just for this area that we're talking about using the ferrous mass plywood product? Just so we can put in terms of percentage savings that 300 grand is. And then secondary to that would be, if these were the same exact costs, would we be having this discussion, or do we acknowledge that one product is superior to the other and we're just really discussing if the 300 grand savings is worth the risk of going to mass plywood product? I did read Kelsey's memo, and at the bottom it talks about it being better long term from a seismic perspective, but to Denny's, Commissioner Elmer's point at the last meeting, we still don't have like a long term building of this scope to know how it holds up 4 or 5 decades down the road.
Derek, do you happen? I didn't happen to bring that estimate with me. Do you happen to have that? You can look it up. The comparison between the two, the steel.
Yeah, hold on one second. I'm trying to pull it up right now. No, I can speak to that here in a second.
And as far, one thing that hasn't been mentioned either, I know Brian Knight's on the call. I don't want to surprise him, but if we did happen to choose steel, it's not going to be just a pre-engineered building that you would normally get. With the seismic stuff that we have, it would be an engineered steel building. Brian, I don't know if you want to speak to that at all. It'd be more custom, if you will, than just ordering a standard steel building.
That's correct. Yeah, it would need to be more robust than a standard steel building, and that's just due to taking all of the seismic load from the original warehouse and dumping it into this new addition building to get the economy and also the benefit of the new building, so that we're to forego the strengthening of a lot of the existing building. And so it would be it would be more robust than just a metal building.
But by using the plywood, just by doing the walls and the beams and posts and that would suffice the seismic part of the existing structure to the new structure?
Not entirely. I'd say it's probably 2/3 of the strengthening of the existing structure can be eliminated and moved into using the new addition to reinforce or to buttress the existing warehouse. There is still some strengthening of the warehouse required, certainly, and that would be primarily at the south end where the mezzanine and the offices are. That end of the building will still need to be reinforced. But it certainly helps significantly reduce the strengthening that's required in the existing building.
And will that portion be reinforced with this plywood product or with something, with steel?
Yeah, with conventional structural steel members, because that's a steel building. And so we'd want to use comparable materials. And so it would be with structural steel. The MPPs would only be for the addition.
Okay. Commissioner Elmer?
In the proposed savings, was that additional 1/3 additional strengthening of the existing building, was that calculated into the savings?
Yeah.
Maybe Steve, you could speak to that.
I think Derek might have the numbers.
Yeah, I pulled up my spreadsheet. Thank you
Okay.
for being patient. So to answer your question, in the comparison, it's the pricing comparison. It was for the overall structure, both of the steel structure and also the MPP structure. So in the pricing, we for the MPP side, we also figured that we would need some structural steel connections at the point in which it is connecting to the pre-engineered metal building. And we don't have it, this is all conceptual, so we don't have, you know, exact connection, but I worked with one of the our steel fab and erect partners, Solid Form, to help me inform this comparison, which is actually kind of like a local subcontractor in an area, Solid Form. So that kind of being said, kind of setting the stage, the comparison is that there would be $311,000 savings approximately. But I think one thing to kind of keep in mind is that we're projecting, you know, an overall 17% savings on this, the structure itself for the warehouse addition using the mass plywood product versus a fab and erect structural steel structure building.
Adam, does that answer your question?
So the total cost of that structure is about 1.7 million, is what you're saying, 1.8, if it's a 17% savings?
Yeah, so it's about 1.8 versus 1.6.
And Adam, that's just for the structure only. That doesn't include anything else like mechanical, electrical, etc.
Okay. Thank you.
But just also follow up on that. So the cost comparison that was done did not include the seismic strengthening of the existing building, because that needs to happen whether we do an MPP addition or a structural steel addition. So the total cost of the project is not the 1.8. I think that was just for a cost comparison, if I understand
Correct.
correctly.
Just the structure only.
Correct, and I understand that. To that point though, Brian, does the strengthening of the existing building become more expensive or less expensive depending on the product we choose for this new building?
No, I would say that the strengthening is going to be the same, whether we use MPP or whether we use the structural steel. We still have to connect them together and drag all of the loading from the existing building into the new building and deliver that over there, so that it won't necessarily change the strengthening of the existing building depending upon what system is used for the addition.
Okay, thank you. And then to that last point I had, Chad, is if there was no savings involved, they were both apples to apples cost wise, what product is superior?
In my mind, if you're gonna ask me personally, if it was apples to apples, I would probably select steel. That's my opinion. It's been around forever. I guess you kind of go back to the warehouse. I mean, most warehouses you see currently are, erected as steel. And I think Commissioner Tankersley has raised some very valid points to this process. What's ended up happening here is I think we're really seeing the benefit of the CMGC. I mean, that's kind of getting lost a little bit in this. I mean, they've come to the table and said, hey, here are a couple options. That's one of the reasons we hired them. And they said, hey, we think they'll perform the same. There is a potential cost benefit to using the MPP in the warehouse. What do you think? And so I really appreciate them even bringing that forward, that we can even have a conversation today. As a potential cost savings, maybe it's not the way we go, but yeah, I guess getting back to your point, Adam, I mean, that's, if everything was equal, I think in my personal opinion, it would probably be steel.
Okay, thank you. That's all for now, Mayor.
Thank you. And there's no way to like use both together in any way? I mean, if you do steel, aren't we gonna add in insulation and all of those costs that we're not doing with the
No.
mass plywood product? But that was probably included in your estimate of comparison. Garrett, maybe?
Yeah, sorry, I was in a meeting. Insulation was not included, but insulation would be needed. The MPP, I didn't include any form of insulation, but also I'm not too sure how it performs as far as retaining heat and whatnot. So I was trying to make as apples to apples. So I know with the structural steel building that, I made sure to include, the perimeter metal stud framing and also, some cladding on that is going to be needed, in which that is the same type of performance level of an MPP panel.
And I'd like to note that what Chad said is correct. I mean, bringing us on board as a CMGC, part of our services is to show options and cost savings. And it was just an idea that we came up with for the MPP panels because there's several projects that are using it. One in Westland, that's a $28 million public works facility. It's got 3 different buildings and probably 4 or 5 different fleet outbuildings that are all going to be MPP panels. And then a large police and public works complex in Tigard that's also going to be designing in MPP panels. And so it was just an idea that we came up with to present to MW&L. So I thought that'd be worth noting.
Perfect, thank you. Any other?
Yeah, I want to say thanks for bringing the wood product as an option to us. After hearing some of Tom's questions and comments at the last meeting and kind of mulling that over, and then some of the information today, I'm just not sure that a few $100,000 cost savings today is gonna pay dividends 5 decades from now when a steel building could still be in use, and potentially we have some degradation of the wood product, to Tom's point, is a glue failure or something like that. So real excited to see this product being used, and it's nice that we have something in Westland or Tigard to look at and see how it ages down the road. And I would love to get some of our fiber into the project, but as far as a risk benefit, I don't see, having to replace a building early a few decades from now to save 300 grand today. I don't know if that really pencils out for a cost benefit.
Thank you, Adam. Do we have anything else on the list to go down?
Well, we do.
We'll come back and.
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Kelsey did put a memorandum together, dated April 1st. There was some other questions in there. Kelsey, do you happen to have that memorandum available to you right now?
Oops, yes, I do. Yeah, it's pulled up.
Would you, I guess if you kind of speak to it a little bit, the oldest structure with ferrous mass plywood, if you would kind of. I'll turn it over.
Yeah, so I mean the year that we finished our manufacturing facility here, we supplied all of the wall panels for the Emerson Advanced Wood Products Laboratory at OSU. It's a large project that's nearby. If there was interest from McMinnville Water and Light and the commission to head over there, we'd be happy to arrange a tour.
So 7 years.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the largest, is that the airport?
Well, largest is difficult to largest cubic footage ordered. I think I do believe was the airport, where we were the structural roof panels, several of the interior commission. Sorry, not commission. I'm blanking on the word, but the little pop-up shops that are inside the airport are made with mass ply, as well as the little eyelashes around the skylights. Those are all mass ply. From a cubic footage standpoint, I think that was our largest project. But the 18-story high rise in Oakland, California was another both high profile and large cubic footage project for us.
And approximately when was that one constructed?
I believe it went up 4 or 5 years ago. I can find out real quick. Webster. It completed construction in 2023, but I believe it began construction in 2021.
And so the airport is not necessarily the structural portion of the airport. It sounds like it's more interior.
I would say that 85 to 90% of what we supplied to the airport is the structural roof, and the remaining 10 to 15% is the interior and decorative elements.
Any questions, commissioners?
You want me to continue through the rest of the answers in that memo that were clarifications to questions asked at the previous meeting?
Yes, please.
Perfect. So yeah, the local fiber contribution to the project, while we can certainly guarantee that some fiber will make it from wood supplied by McMinnville Water and Light, we can't guarantee a particular percentage, because when we peel the veneer from those trees, there's no guarantee on what the grade makeup will be from those trees. And in a specific mass ply panel, and more specifically the individual lamellas that make up that mass ply panel, beam, or column, have a specific recipe depending on their structural use. So the beams, as I was talking, would be one grade, likely the columns would be a different grade, and then the wall and roof panels would be a different grade. And each of those grades takes a certain recipe of veneer grades to make. And we just don't know what grades will come from the trees from McMinnville. And so we wouldn't be able to guarantee a certain percentage that we would know would make it into the project, just because of that unknown factor. But we could certainly guarantee that some fiber would make it through.
Yeah. Putting her on that list.
There's 2 more
Okay.
on there.
Yeah. So one thing we mentioned at the end of the meeting is that we were going to try to track down the technical standards that are used in our manufacturing process, from the grading of the logs all the way through to the mass ply panels. As I started to dig in after our meeting, I found that it was a kind of a rabbit hole. Even just the codes that apply to the testing of our panels in our QC system led to, I believe it was 79 different applicable codes. And then I started digging into the rest of the process and realized that I was going to be in the thousands. And so just wanted to verify that this is a product that's been around for, well, the first codes made that apply to our product were made in the 40s. And of the applicable codes from ASTM, ANSI, and APA, the majority of them were established in the 70s, but have undergone, revisions over the years. So while I do understand the comments that this is a newer product, we've been making laminated veneer products since, I believe, the 70s, and this isn't anything new to us. And the final clarification had to do with Commissioner Tankersley's appropriate questioning of the statement that was made in that first memo, which was that the panels are tested to a 6-cycle vacuum pressure oven dry treatment, which simulates 10 years of exposure. And to clarify that, I spoke with my technical director, and his comment to me that it was simulating 10 years of exposure was just in passing. It was not in the code, and it was not, there's nothing in those codes that actually intends to simulate a certain amount of time in the field or a certain amount of time at all. So it was unfortunately a comment that I took more literally, but was made just to signify the robust nature of those tests. And then there was a typo in his email to me, which stated that we needed to meet 65% of the untreated strength values. That was 75%, as clarified earlier in the meeting today. And then just to sort of further validate that, or further explain that, the codes that govern our products require 2 tests. The sort of the minimum requirements of those tests are either a single vacuum pressure soak treatment, and then meeting 65% of the original values, or a 6-cycle test. Sorry, 1 cycle test and 75% of the values, or 6-cycle test and 65% of the values. And we chose, when we qualified our products, to go above and beyond both of those testing standards to do a 6-cycle test that meets 75% of the strength values, just because we believe in our product and know that it's a robust product. And so that was the rest of the clarification to that statement that there was a lot of conversation about in the first commission meeting.
Could I ask Kelsey a question?
Sure.
Would you mind? So Kelsey, these testing requirements that you're talking about, are these unique to MPPs, or are these for just plywood products? These testing requirements for garden variety plywood?
So these all apply to CLT products. They're developed within PRG 320, which is the applicable code that governs our products, as well as traditional CLT made with dimensional lumber.
Right.
That said, the test stems from a test that is designed for structural composite lumber, which is LVL, PSL, products like that. And that is the other test that I referenced, was the sort of the test that was adopted into PRG 320, which is the CLT code.
So it's very similar to the testing that's done for plywood,
Regular
which is a
plywood.
laminated veneer product, or other laminated veneer structural materials that have been around for 60 plus years in the construction industry.
Correct. Yep.
So is it true that, and I understand the discussion about the glue and the concern about the adhesive, but it seems as though this is a rather old technology in terms of 60 years old. It's just a new application of a structural product for as far as mass plywood. I mean, it's essentially plywood. It's just a lot thicker than what we would normally see. Is that a so it's really kind of old. It's not a new technology. It's just a new application of old technology. Is that a true statement, or is there something really unique about the MPPs that make it, completely novel, and new in the marketplace, just in terms of how it compares to traditional composite structural materials, wood structural materials?
Yeah. So I appreciate the question. The only thing about mass ply that is, what we would refer to as novel is the connection between 4x8 sheets of material that make up the lamellas, that scarf joint. In traditional LVL manufacturing, they just lay up veneers in a really long format. They don't lay up individual sheets of plywood in that format. And so, yeah, the only sort of novel part of our process is the panel to panel, or sorry, sheet to sheet connection. Everything else is per the way that LVL has been manufactured for, as you mentioned, I believe it's going on just shy of 90 years.
Commissioner Tankersley?
Isn't it true, though, that plywood has one set of needs for structural stability, and what you're using as a structural element, as opposed to a shear wall or something, of a building, a post or a beam, or using the walls to support the roof, that's different than what plywood would be, and the stress levels and the testing have to be different, right?
I would agree with you to an extent. There are a lot of similarities in the way that a sheet of plywood that clads a light frame structure transfers loads similarly to the way that mass plywood panels do. And then just one more clarification, which is that the beams and columns that we use are just slightly larger versions of the LVLs that are available as a commodity product, but otherwise they're the same. So as far as the beams and columns in the project, those would equate to an LVL or a PSL, or another structural composite lumber product. And then our wall panels, while they are thicker than plywood, they're not held to any other stand. I mean, I guess the only thing that it's sort of combining an LVL and a sheet of plywood into the same product, I guess you could say, because in LVL and PSL and other structural composite lumber products are used to transfer loads parallel to the grain of the wood in the same way that they're used in a mass plywood panel. So that, again, it's sort of the same concepts, but just on a larger scale. Nothing about the way that loads are transferred is different than the way that loads would be transferred in a beam or a column. They're the sort of only unique thing is that gravity and diaphragm and shear loading would be transferred through the same piece rather than the two pieces needing to be connected with nails or screws, however the builder decided to build the building.
I'd like to add too that, I mean, even the building you're sitting in right now has plywood on the roof, plywood on the walls. And the traditional use of plywood, like at the roof, for example, the thickness of that plywood is is always going to be dictated by how far apart the framing members are, the roof joist. If they're 24 inches apart versus if they're 48 inches apart. We commonly would use, 1/2 inch or 5/8 plywood for the roof, but if the roof members are spaced further apart, let's say 4 feet, we'd use 1 1/8 inch plywood. So we'd use a thicker plywood to span that. And the MPPs at the roof, you're essentially just doing the same thing. You're just spanning a lot further. Your supports might be 20 feet apart instead of 4 feet apart. In terms of that, so in terms of that technology or the application, it's just a thicker piece of plywood. On the walls, we would normally use plywood, and they have to be, since they're thinner, like 1/2 inch or 5/8. Certainly, they're tall and slender, and you try and put some. If you stood them up on their end and you try to support the roof framing on them, they would buckle because they're so slender, and they're just unstable. And so you have to have wood framing studs there to carry those loads, and you're nailed off to it. In this application of MPP, you just have a really thick piece of plywood out there that is stable and able to support that load, and it doesn't have any, it doesn't buckle under the weight of the roof. So you kind of get 2 for 1 in that sense. But I would also agree with Kelsey. It's just another application of an LVL is just a laminated veneer lumber, or a PSL is a parallel strand lumber. They're products that are held together by adhesive and glue and have been used for many, many years. So I do understand the concern about, the adhesive. I'm not sure that it's brand new technology. There's millions and millions and millions of square feet across the US that have been built over the last decades, 50, 60 years with laminated wood products. So that's all I'll say about that.
Commissioner Elmer?
Yeah.
Oh, you want to go first?
Well, I do have a question. This is a follow-up to, this is Sam Justice. I'm general counsel for Water and Light. But just to follow up to the question that Commissioner Garvin asked, Mr. Hudson, Brian, either you or Stephen, would you answer kind of the same question as far as if everything cost was apples to apples? Do you have a preference as to the material, just aside from price?
Me personally, I do think that MPP has additional benefits. One, just the sustainability piece. The other is the tariff piece, that is the current environment you're facing. I also think there are insulating value benefits of the MPP walls and roof that you don't get with the steel unless you add in additional insulation. And there's certainly, and Kelsey could talk more about it, but the speed of construction, I think the erection time is substantially less, because with the MPPs, you kind of, almost get the whole built up assembly in one piece. Like, for example, the steel roof, we would have steel beams or steel joist, and then you'd erect those, and then you'd have to come back and put a structural steel metal decking over the top of it, and that has to be laid down in pieces and fastened together. And then you can, but with the MPPs, you don't have as many framing supports, because in a steel system, the roof joists are going to be 8 to 10 feet apart at most. With the MPP system, you can have far fewer roof support members because the panels can span a lot further distance, and so you have far less pieces to put together. So I do think there's a benefit in terms of just speed of construction. And I do think there is the benefit of just the thermal performance. As I think Kelsey shared last time, that their warehouse, the fluctuation of temperature from dead of summer to dead of winter really just doesn't vary that much, and that's due to kind of the thermal mass, just the thickness of of the building, and both the walls and the roof. So I do think there's certainly heating, cooling benefits there that you won't get in a steel building unless you add quite a bit of insulation values to the walls and to the roof.
And I think procurement of materials, there's other things to think about besides costs savings is, things like this product is local, it's sustainable. You can know that, you'll have MW&L's product in there to some certain percentage. But the sustainability, and I think the local supply is a huge one, knowing that it's, right there in Lyons, Oregon, versus the steel is something to think about. There's other things besides cost to think about.
Are Brian and Jeremiah, with your answers, how do you feel about the longevity of it?
I mean, it's like building a house. All houses are built out of wood. You clad it with products that are going to protect the wood. It's the same thing. I know when we were at the Ferris warehouse, you had the MPP on the canopy carport, and it's clad with metal panels and other things, which is what we would do here, and that protects the wood. Lasts a really long time.
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. So for us, a large percentage of our work is evaluation of existing buildings and structures. And over the course of my career, 30 years here, I've been in thousands and thousands of buildings across the country, and a lot of them here in the Northwest that are from the 50s, 60s, 70s. That wood frame buildings, certainly wood frame, heavy timber roof, or glue laminated roof members, whether they're warehouses or schools or all across the board. And there's these buildings are still in great shape unless they've had some fatal flaw in terms of water intrusion or abuse or lack of maintenance and neglect. These buildings are have no real sign of structural distress, and there's no reason I would expect that they wouldn't continue to serve their useful purpose for well into the future. If you go even further, back east, you can see wood frame buildings that are hundreds of years old, just maybe not made out of structural composite lumber, but wood framing and wood products are definitely stable, reliable material that I would have no concerns personally if I was a ratepayer at McMinnville of using a wood frame building and using these laminated, this application of a laminated composite wood member. I don't think there's a big risk personally, and that's just me speaking for myself, of these panels having significant structural issues over their expected 50 or even 100-year building life, just based on professional experience.
Agree with Brian. We do a ton of renovations of old buildings built in the 1900s in Portland, downtown Portland, and even PNC's offices, heavy timber, old heavy timber. Derek, I don't remember how old our office is 1917 or something like that. Heavy timber columns and beams and roof frame and all that. So I echo what Brian's saying on the structural side.
Sorry, Commissioner Elmer.
Yeah, I just, from our last meeting, it kind of spurred my thoughts and Tom's questions, and I 2 points. I first off, I always support the timber industry. I've been in it for 20 some years, and been in the demolition side for about 20 some years. And about a month ago, I went out to look at a project that was being demoed, which is out at Hampton in Willamina. And I got a call because on the one of our businesses is reclaiming old timbers and old wood. And they said, man, this building is beautiful. They've built a whole new section. They got to tear down this. And it was like 100 by 400 building. So it's massive. And they said there's hundreds of 12x12s and timbers as far as you can see. And I went out there, and when you walk in, it's dusty and dirty, or from 100 years of use or however many years. And everybody's very excited because there's a lot of material. And as we looked at it, everything in there was plywood or laminated beams. The posts, the trusses, everything in there was, there's no solid timbers. The entire building was made out of glue lamps, and it was in perfect shape. I mean, from my experience, on the demolition side, the only time we ever see issues is if something's not taken care of. If it's the sidings come off, your plywood, it'll start coming apart. It's typically, it's not a glue issue, it's the wood expanding and contracting in it. And so that side of me, is seeing that and seeing it's been around for so long, I was comfortable, and I just feel like I'm pretty comfortable with that product. And then I reached out to a friend of mine who works for Superior SIP, which they do panels, but it's foam filled, it's more insulated side. And I asked him about this, and he said, their company's been around for 40 years, and they compete against mass timber products for construction. And he said, we beat them out all the time. And I said, well, this one is, why do you beat them out? He said, well, our insulation value is huge. And I said, well, what if we're building a structure that's non-insulated? And he said, well, if it's a big structure and it's not insulated, he goes, we can never compete against them because the value is very good there. And I said, he's only worked there for, I think, 9 years. So I asked him to ask somebody who's been there for a while. And he said, the response from them was, they don't see any issues. They haven't seen any issues in other structures that have been built this way. It's, they perform well. It's the cost savings of setting them up. That's the other advantage of the SIP products, are how fast they can be assembled and how less labor it takes to erect those structures. So, and I come back to, I want to do the best for the citizens of McMinnville. What product would be the best? I guess from my experience and what I see, and always wanting to support the local and the timber industry, I wouldn't do that at the expense of doing something inferior to something. But I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with this product. I would support it, but
Okay,
I'm just.
so you're supportive of the mass
I'm
plywood
support-
product?
Yeah.
Okay.
From what I've experienced.
Lisa Macy Baker. Oh, wait a minute, Tom. Tom
No,
has a
it's-
question.
No, I'll wait my turn. That's fine. I was
Okay.
just getting ready.
Commissioner Baker, can you give us?
Yeah, I trust our hired contractors. From the research that I've done, which is minimal, and just reading the various PDFs, I would trust this product for the citizens of McMinnville. I appreciate the sustainability and using our fiber. And again, for me, who doesn't have experience in this, though we just built a house with a ton of wood and a ton of glue lamps and beams, I go with the experts, and I believe the experts in the room are P&C, our hired contractors, and then the engineers. And if they agree that this product is sufficient, I'm all for it.
Thank you. Commissioner Tankersley?
Yes, first of all, I do truly appreciate the contractor bringing this forward. I think that was it's what we wanted and what we were promised in the process, and we got it. So I really appreciate that. I also appreciate Ferreras. I think they've been very open. They've admitted things that, were not in their best, their best side, not their best side, not the best looking thing for them. But and the plant seems very nice. On the other hand, as Adam said, and as I've been concerned all along, I don't think $300,000 of savings is sufficient to do this. And I thought it was very interesting that our Chad, our person who will be in charge of taking care of this and in charge of the construction project, said that if there weren't a cost difference, he would go with steel just because that's what has the track record. And we do try to do things that are going to last a long time. So I think that we should go with the steel and pass up this opportunity to use what may be a wonderful new technology. But I think we need to look a long time in the future. So thank you all very much.
Thank you. Commissioner Garvin?
Thank you. Nothing really in the last part of that memo really changed my opinion that I don't think the cost benefits there to take a risk for our ratepayers. I do love the concept of the technology. I'm a firm believer in glue lam beams and use those in projects I've done and the project I'm doing right now. I just think it's a minimal savings for trying to reinvent the wheel. If we already have a steel structure out there, put the addition on a steel structure, even though it needs to be engineered and it takes more time. One of the major benefits I see of using steel is in our first meeting, it was mentioned if there's significant water intrusion or extended exposure to like a sprinkler system, if there's a fire, that there could be issues with these panels. And I would hate to have to replace a building because we had a minor fire, but the sprinkler system was going for a while, and so now we have some water damage in our panels. And if that was a steel structure, it's the structure integrity of that building's still going to be there. You're going to have to replace drywall and plywood and things like that, but you can do that on a as needed basis. Whereas if we go with this mass plywood, it seems like we're going to have to do full panel replacement. So I get that it's a what if scenario, but I just have reservations about jumping into a project that has that kind of ramifications if a what if scenario happened.
Thank you. So I guess it comes down to me because we're 50-50 right now.
The other thing I would add to that, Mayor, don't mean
Yes.
to cut you off. It is sustainable, but the ability of our fiber to be in there, I think, tips the scales a little bit. But the inability of Ferris to commit to any percentage at all, other than saying that it will be in there, but we don't know if that's 1%, 10%, or 75% of our product. To me, also just kind of made it seem like it was a stamp or an attaboy that will get some wood in there for you, but we're not willing to commit to anything on paper. So for me, that kind of removed that from the equation of my decision makers.
Kelsey, did you want to speak to that? You look like I can see it in your
yeah, just that we can't see inside the tree. We don't know what can come out of it, and if we were to make a guarantee that we'd get a certain percentage of, if we were able to know what rate of veneer we could get out of every log that came into our yard, I think we'd be well, yeah, you get the intent of what I'm saying. We just don't know what's in the wood, and that's really the root of why we can't put a value to it. We don't want to overpromise and underdeliver. We'd rather be realistic with setting expectations and deliver what we can do.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate that. I just expected there to be with the amount of years you guys have been doing it, and you've seen our wood, as you mentioned previously, that there would be the ability to at least, you know, put a low ball number in there instead of no number at all.
That's fair. I will say that we attempted to do this. I spoke to the vice president and owner, Tyler Ferris, actually, and the other brother and vice president, Kyle Ferris, and we attempted to do this for OSU. They supplied wood, and we were able to segregate that wood all the way through our process. But what we found is that because we were unable to control the percentages of the grades that came out of the wood, we were only able to use, I believe it was like 15% of the wood that they had supplied into the structure that they produced. It's because at the end of the day, the makeup of the grades that were able to be cut from the logs that they delivered weren't the makeup of the grades that were in the panels and beams and columns that went into their structure. And so we sort of, out of an abundance of caution, were concerned that potentially that was even on the high side. And like I said, we're not ones to overpromise and underdeliver. We'd rather be frank with you and say that it's just not possible for us to tell what makeup of grades we'll get out of each log, and we just can't make a guess just because we don't want to make false promises.
That's fair, and I can appreciate that. Thank you.
So it sounds like there's still a chance, though. Hopefully we'll have some product in there if we should go that route, but I understand your inability to make a promise. So my decision on how I feel about it is reading up, kind of doing some research myself, and then reading the memos it is kind of a which way. Either way would be great. I like the sustainability of the wood product. Of course, we have the history of the steel product. The seismic, though, with the wood as well is important to me. But I guess what actually made me 100% decide was the engineer's opinion. I appreciate Chad, but Chad's not an engineer. He's a facilities guy. But I trust your opinion. But to me, I want to trust an engineer that this is what he does. And this is what he has history in doing. I personally have been around lots of buildings that have glue lambs over the years in the construction world as well. And they're obviously stronger than just regular wood, putting them all together for that. And the longevity, and then also the erection. And I think that there's going to be more to the steel than what we're looking at in that comparison when you think of insulation and all those other additionals that we have to do with steel versus him comparing the product to the steel and just manufacturing the structure of the pieces together, not talking about insulation and all of that. So I would go with the mass product. Go ahead.
Okay, so I guess the issue is, I think we'd like to see this kind of in the form of emotions. It sounds like we have sort of a split opinion.
We do.
I think, and so I think, if I'm reading the room right, it would be, the motion would be a motion to direct staff and contractors to move forward using the MPP product in design of the warehouse addition and expansion toward a proposal for a guaranteed maximum price. So we're giving direction into the design process toward that ultimate decision of a guaranteed maximum price. So that would, in my view, that would be the motion. And so the question is that something, is a commissioner wanting to move that direction?
Is there a commissioner that wants to make that motion or no?
So moved.
Okay, so I have a motion from
Second.
Commissioner Lisa Macy Baker And I have a second from Commissioner Elmer. Trina, is this one you want to take a call? Okay,
Yes, please. Mayor Morris,
yes.
Commissioner Tankersley,
No,
Commissioner Elmer,
Yes.
Commissioner Garvin,
Nay.
Commissioner Macy Baker.
Yes.
Motion passes 3-2.
Thank you, everyone, for the great discussion.
I'd like to thank everybody too. I thought it was very good discussion and everybody had good input.
Yeah, thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.